everyone, and welcome to Heart and Hand, the Rangers podcast. My name is David Edgar. I am your host as we celebrate our 15th anniversary since we started doing this. And one of the original podders from back in the day joins me today as we look back on the Brugge friendly. It's Cammy Bell. Hello, Cameron.
Hello, my friend. Yeah, 15 wonderful years of doing Heart and Hand. Where does the time go?
Where does the time go? That's
the nights are fair drawn in, David.
Nights are fair drawn in.
Yeah.
You never see white dog shit anymore, and so on and so forth. But yeah, we were back at Ibrox yesterday to watch Rangers take on Brugge in a friendly. And the manager spoke afterwards, Cammy, about that if we didn't have Paneth and Icos in a few weeks, he wouldn't have taken on a friendly against a side of this quality. And we were actually discussing this the other day, that the old days you used to start off, remember, you would start off with a fairly straightforward game and build up and play your toughest friendly just as the season begins. But I think he really did want to give them a test. And I've got to say, first things first, Bruges, I think, are a team that I'd like us to play like that. Their press was brilliantly executed. They all knew what they were doing with it. Comfortable on the ball, moving the ball quickly. And this is a side that has been, successful in their own league for a few years and then getting into the Champions League and then each year investing a bit more, selling on at the right time, bringing in players. So in a way, I was kind of almost sitting there watching them, particularly in that first half, and thinking there's a lot here that I want us to be taking on board.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think when you get into these friendlies, right, and listen, let's be honest, right, they're a glorified kickabout in most cases. So you can't take anything really from them apart from looking at the new signings, looking to see a little bit of fitness, getting a little bit of a gauge in terms of, the system. It's particularly in our circumstance of that a new manager coming in wants to be able to play, and we'll unpack, obviously, the kind of game went. And for me, I always like to say, right, how seriously the opposition taking it. As you say, you could play against the Hamiltonakis or whomever and say, right, they know they're going to face a tough test. Bruges, for me, I thought took the game really professionally. It's probably the best way.
They've got qualifiers coming up, so that's why they took the game.
I was going to say, yeah. So they've got a little bit of vested interest in playing against a decent European team in ourselves, and it was interesting to me that they started well. I thought, first of all, they're a big team. There's some height in that team.
And power, yep.
Yeah, and so they'll be strong, they'll be physical, which is good, because I think that's some of the things that we needed to give a bit of this new squad a taste of, because it was certainly lacking last season in terms of how we stood up to that. I thought they started the game brightly, but you've hit the nail on the head. For me, what really probably took me aback a little bit, and maybe again because of the context of the friendly, was just that they suffocated our space really quickly. The press was excellent, as you say. We didn't have much room to orchestrate, and again, we know that team, right, that Rangers started with on Sunday, will never play that 11. We'll never play that again, right?
No.
But then at the same point, you're kind of saying to yourself, right, well, okay, how are you going to stand up to that test? How are you going to go out there? And again, I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, because there are some very high points for me from yesterday. And I liked it. I liked the way the Bruges came out, as you say, the style, their approach to it. They were good on the ball, very clinical at times, some nice passing. And if you were to look at what Russell Martin could take away from it, then I think there's certainly some lessons that we could take from how that team orchestrated themselves and how they took their approach to the game. I thought that Russell Martin would probably look at that and go, yeah, there's definitely some key things I could take away from that. And sometimes, as you know, Davey, some of the best ideas in life are the stolen ideas. So if it gives them some inspiration for some of that, then yeah, I think yesterday served its purpose.
Yeah, you saw that. I don't think it was a case of Rangers naming the strongest team in the first half and then making lots of changes. He'd mixed it deliberately, I think, went to see certain combinations, see how players did. Now, first off, start with the negative, because it started very negatively, 2 down inside the opening 13 minutes and getting played off the park, if we're being very truthful, for the first 20 minutes or so. They hit the post during this spell as well, and they were absolutely all over us. And a big part of that was the central defensive partnership, Robin Proper and Leon King next to him. Let's be honest here, neither of them are going to be mainstays on a Rangers side. They're just not cut out for it in either way. And Proper, I think, will certainly leave this summer. King may stay to the end of his contract, which is next summer, but he's not going to feature much. I'm not entirely sure that the boy is a centre-back. I don't think we've handled his development over the last few years particularly well, but he's not going to make it at Rangers, and they got torn apart constantly.
Yeah, they were really, really displaced at times. It lacked a lot of organisation, and it's one of those things that we all hoped Robin Propper would bring in to that central defence, is to be able to get it lined up properly. In an ideal world, you'd want him talking to guys like Leon King and saying, "Look, you go here and I'll go there," and it's been missing for a year now. So you can't rewind the tape and hope that he's going to produce something which he hasn't shown any evidence of in the last 12 months. I think that Leon King, I mean, I've said before, Leon King has overstayed his part at Ibrox, and I don't mean that disrespectfully to him. I agree with you completely that we could have done and should have done more in terms of his development, but equally at the same point, he has to have been sitting on the bench last season and just going, I need to think very seriously about my future. I think he's definitely got talent, so I think he can play in a team where he's going to feature regularly and become potentially a big part of that team.
I genuinely don't think he's a centre back. I think he's a centre midfielder, like a
very,
number 6.
Very possibly, but fundamentally he needs game time.
He does. He needs to play to find that out. Aye, 100%.
Yeah, and so are we doing him a disservice by not giving him a wee bit that nudge to say, look, it's time to part ways, and we can all be amicable, and nobody I'm sure would turn around and say, oh, Leon King never tried. I'm certain he did try, of course he did. But again, he has to think about himself. It's fine being at Rangers, but you don't want to look back in your career after it's done and going, did I miss opportunities to go elsewhere and really develop my game, really become a huge part of a club? Yeah, I think as you say, it's time that these two guys seriously thought about what their next steps are.
And I think that in the first half, one of the things was when Rangers gave the ball away cheaply, which rustiness, whatever you want to call it, first game back the pre-season. That's what happens against quality sides. You give the ball away too easy. And it's always been the case in Europe. There's nothing new here. They win the ball off you high up and they're away. And that's what happened to us several times yesterday. Began to steady that a little bit, I thought, around about the kind of half-hour mark. And then manager made a lot of changes at half-time. In particular, he brought on James Tavernier at centre-back, and then later on Fernandez came on, Emmanuel Fernandez, a new signing. And then when there was no panic in the back line, Rangers actually began to play. And, of course, they'd made changes too. You take that into account. But in the second half, it was a lot better. And I began to see signs of what he wants to do. The full-backs tucking in, centre-backs bringing the ball out, midfield having more kind of assigned positions rather than just being a rough three. And he mentioned, and he said this before, he doesn't want the skillful players wasting all their energy at the back trying to get the ball. Other people should be able to do that for them, and then we should be winning the ball back high up the park. And it was interesting to me that our 2 goals came from doing that, from good pressing, winning the ball high up, and then delivering the pass for the finish, first for Diamandi, then for Finlay Curtis.
And I'd echo that sentiment that you made about the subs at halftime when Tavernier came on, Diamandi and Bajrami came on. They clearly made the difference, as you say. Bajrami, I thought, played really well. I didn't think I'd be sitting here saying that, a few months ago, but here we are. There's experience that these guys bring into the side, of course there is. I do like, for all of James Tavernier's criticism, when he's had to step in to that centre-half spot, he has brought calmness. There's no doubt about it, right? I think, Max, are we saying Aaron's or
apparently?
Aaron's, yeah. So we'll definitely flip between that for the
undoubtedly
the rest of the pods this season. But I thought Aaron's needed a wee bit of kind of calming down. Tav, I think, helped him out with a little bit of that. They played, I think, about 15 minutes or so together, which is fine. But we've seen Tav do that, especially with some of the younger players in big games. Diamandi comes on, and again, like you say, I think he just looks a wee bit more, assured. Midfield starts to take a little bit more of a familiar shape, I think, in terms of how we wanted to set ourselves up properly. And listen, what you said at the top of the show is totally right. There's no value to us going out and starting our best 11 to then say, right, let's start well and then see it dismantle. Let's give everyone a chance and see how it goes, see how they take some instructions. And again, like you say, try and get a wee bit more of a foothold in the game. I wasn't really too concerned about the 2-0 scoreline at half-time, because we knew that those changes were going to come in, and Rangers, I think, came back into it and were unlucky, actually, with another few bits of play before we obviously got the equaliser right at the death.
Yeah, I mean, there was some decent playing. I'm kind of with you. I don't take too much store in pre-season results, but I do take performance. And in the first half, as I say, it was an absolute chasing. So it was good to at least see bits and begin to see shape and whatnot. Talk about some individual players then. And again, it's just, we're not making any judgments based on a friendly, and most of them only Finlay Curtis played the full 90. But an interesting one for me was, first of all, Nedim Bajrami. And, he looked a lot better than he has looked previously at Rangers. He's a guy I just assumed would be going. And we are, we've signed a few attacking midfielders, so the space isn't there, and they may look to move them on. But occasionally you do get a new manager in, and somebody who you hadn't expected begins to deliver performances that you didn't realise he was capable of because he hasn't shown before. Maybe it could be him, and the odds are against it, but he was good. I enjoyed watching him yesterday.
So did I. There was a point, I think I mentioned it to you chaps during the game, where he actually does really, really well on the right-hand side of the box. And he does a wee feint and he tries to get the defence, and he's looking directly across the line. He's waiting for Danilo to be able to try and come in and get the ball across to him. Danilo just a little bit of a kind of yard off it, couldn't get there in time, and then nothing much came of it. But the composure, which he has been missing for the last season, was there in abundance yesterday. And do you know what? If we were sitting here and again, like you say, we had been playing Hamilton Accies, that'd be the first thing that you and I'd be saying is, well, it's Hamilton Accies, but it isn't. And so for me, he looked up, he was able to pick out the passes, which we were all crying out for from when he first joined us and what we'd seen him do for his national team. Being a bit of a goal threat, getting into forward areas and looking to be able to create something, either whether or not it's a shot for himself or, as I say, squaring it for a teammate. And he looked positive. Now, obviously, you and I will never know what the conversations are between Russell Martin and Nedim Bajrami about his future and what he wants to do. Very theoretically, he could have turned around and say, look, I've not had a great start, but I want to use this pre-season. I want to use the qualifiers to show you what I can do because I'm committed to my future here. And if that was the case, I think his performance yesterday certainly showed some bright sparks of that. It's about being able to see what happens next with him, as you say. I think that he's keen on being able to, again, like I say, bolster that midfield. We've obviously supplemented that somewhat. We may have some movement as well, depending who goes. But I don't think he did his chances any harm if his plan is to stay longer term.
No, I mean, he was decent. I thought Fernandez came on, won a few duels again, to be too early to say about a big lad, though. I mean, that's nice. And
there's a listen, I have not watched Peterborough enough that I could say this with any real kind of commitment, but there was a couple of them which I thought was quite interesting, where firstly, he will not be moved physically. I think that was a big thing. We talk about Clinton and Ciala, about being moved off the ball proper, again, being moved off the ball. I thought it was nice and strong. A couple of them kind of came in for high balls where he's got the attacker, that he's shielding him. I would have thought with his height, his immediate default option would have been to try and head the ball clear, but he didn't. He was very composed in terms of, trying to stick a leg out, stopping the attacker from playing a quick ball to the side. I was actually quite surprised by his approach to it because I thought, it could just be a guy just comes in, just clears it with his head, not a problem, right? The ball's up the park, you deal with it. If it comes back my way, I'll do the same again. I thought there was a wee bit more to his game than that.
Yeah, no, he was fine in the middle of the park yesterday. And one guy who did his chances no harm. Actually, I thought all the youngsters that played yesterday did well. Bailey Rice came on and exerted a bit of control in the middle of the park. Young Josh Gentles, who's only 17, came on and definitely there's promise there. And unlike a lot of, in general, Scottish strikers, he looks as though he's got a bit of build about him as well. Young Hutton came on at right back. But Finlay Curtis got the goal now. Listeners to our Patreon will know that I've been wanging on about Finlay Curtis for a while. And the reason is simple. He scores goals at any level he's been at in his life. Now, obviously, the higher the level you go, the more difficult it becomes to do that. But what it means is he can finish. Now, in the first team squad, will he be able to get into those positions the way he does at levels, better defenders, etc.? Will he be able to do all the other stuff you need to do to be a first team player at Rangers? I get that. But he's somebody who, if you put the ball in front of him in a decent position, knows how to put it away. And you saw that yesterday, 89th minute. He's played the full game, tired, makes the correct run, chooses the correct finish, executes perfectly. And that's a skill, Cammy. And people sometimes mock, for example, Chris Boyd. Chris Boyd, his shot selection, to borrow a term from another sport, was absolutely brilliant. And I think that's something that, okay, there's something to build on there. And it doesn't matter, if you're clean through in the B team or you're clean through at Rangers. Are you going to hit it straight into the goalkeeper, or are you going to pick your spot and put it away? And he's a boy who can do the latter. So I am very hopeful that we'll begin to see a bit more from him this season.
Yeah, listen, you say Chris Boyd, I could even see a Jermaine Defoe-esque finish in terms of just, as soon as the ball broke out to him, he's got the opportunity. He's not had that many chances to be able to show it within the first team, but as you say, he's been banging them in for the B team / academy youth team, whatever we're going to call them. And it was a great finish. As I say, I'm so pleased for him in terms of getting the full game. I think that's absolutely fantastic for him. He has shown flashes. I think you're right. There's going to be a challenge for him that, irrespective of what happens with our striking situation, which, let's face it, that picture could look totally different this time, by the end of the week, that he absolutely puts himself into the manager's consideration, because that finish was fantastic for, as you say, a boy who had played the entire game. The chance presents himself. Ibrox was still fairly well occupied by this point, by the way. It's safe to say, even though it was 89 minutes in a friendly on a Sunday. And yeah, didn't even have to think twice about it. Just nice slot home. Great for him to be able to try and get the goal and get into that position. And yeah, as I say, I was delighted for him. But his performance overall, I thought, was nice and strong. One player, obviously, I did mention a couple of them actually, but Gentle did have a decent chance where the ball kind of broke to him. He just couldn't get the shot away, but he hadn't been on the park long at that time. What really impressed me yesterday, if I'm being honest with you, David, was Bailey Rice's attitude. Bailey Rice, I don't think, was thinking about playing a friendly yesterday. He was very much in to make sure that people knew that he was playing in that game. A couple of the tackles out on the Brugge right-hand side, our left-hand side, I remember, he wasn't giving the ball up. He was getting in. He was nice and strong and physical, going in against, men. And he was absolutely standing his ground with them. And he was passionate about it. And again, that's exactly what you want to see from these young guys. Barry Ferguson spoke about it before, where he knows that he can trust these younger players because they're hungry and they've got that desire. Russell Martin said the same thing. He's mentioned, obviously, in his post-match yesterday that, he really likes the guys' approach and their attitudes and how they are in and around the first squad, very much part of that first team squad now. So exactly the same. Hutton, I think, it's a bit difficult because, he didn't get a huge amount of game time compared to some of the other guys. But yeah, certainly those three I was pleased with yesterday for sure.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Now the team head down to St George's Park in England this week. We'll be doing a training camp. The manager spoke about, vaguely, didn't go into detail about behind closed doors fixtures ahead of the game against Panathinaikos. But for us as supporters, I think our attention turns to signings. And at the time of recording, Rangers hadn't confirmed the signing of Nasser Giga, but it looks as though that'll be happening. Another big centre-back, been linked heavily with another centre-back as well. They seem to be moving through bits of the team in stages. We've brought in Rothwell and Asgard now, Fernandez, and it looks like certainly at least one, possibly two other centre-backs, and then moving to the front players. One thing that they have in common, Cammy, is a physicality. And clearly this is something that Rangers have identified as a problem last season, which is unsurprising because I think you only needed functioning eyes. You didn't need a UEFA A licence qualifier to see that Rangers could be physically overwhelmed by opponents, and it happened far too regularly.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier on, you think about some of those games that were just an absolute farce and we're getting pulled and pushed all over the park and we're not standing our ground. And you do need to be strong mentally to play for Rangers for sure, but when you're playing within that back line, you have to ensure that you do not give up your space, for one thing, because it's not about necessarily hauling a guy down if he's trying to trap a ball or shield the ball or doing like that's not what it's about. What it's about is making sure that firstly you're organised and you know where everyone is. understand, get a wee bit of a degree of empathy for the fact that we obviously did have to chop and change around the back five a lot, especially towards the latter half of the last season. And we mentioned before, Butland and his confidence, and I think there's a confidence of who's playing ahead of him. I get all of that. I understand where that has to happen, but there were too many goals that we lost, David, where it's not even just about, as I say, being able to attack the ball. It's about, even if a player who's creating space for a teammate physically moves you out of the way and creates that space. Yes, it's not elite football, of course, it's not, we understand that, but it's the league that we play in. And as you say, it's some of those core basics that drove us crazy last season, because they're so frustrating to watch when you see two guys who are roughly kind of same size, but one just can absolutely bully the other one. And as soon as you know that you've got your marker and you can do that to him, you'll have an absolute riot against them all day, because now you can push him, you can pull him, you can move him where you want him to go rather than him being able to put you where he wants you to go. It's so, as I say, it's so basic. It's crazy, but as I say, Jiggle, I think looks an interesting one. I think that we're hoping that will be confirmed pretty soon, but you can see where exactly the priorities were, and I think we all said it last season. So I'm glad to see that there's definitely been some surgery performed there.
Yeah, no, definitely. It was a constant frustration last season, but you need to marry it to other things as well, quality, which we lacked last season as well. Still some talk about the two of the strikers that we have. We have three strikers, and one played yesterday. Two Cyril Dessers was back yesterday at the ground, but he hasn't trained due to a slight injury, although he's back on the grass this week, the manager said. And Hamza Igaman, who had an issue with his visa, but that's all been sorted, so he'll be back as well. Both heavily linked with moves away to Lille, and some suggestions, one to Lille, one to AEK Athens, but some suggestions as those clubs not coming up with Rangers valuation, and therefore Rangers not budging. Your thoughts on that, Cammy?
The Dessers one's interesting because we have spoken about Cyril Dessers a lot across the various shows in Heart and Hand. What you can criticise him for is the goals that he's missed. What you cannot criticise him for is the goals that he's scored. And we're over 50 goals in 2 seasons. So you have to be able to replace that. If Athens, it's difficult with both potential deals, because whilst I applaud Rangers for sticking to their guns, you can't be impossible to deal with. Now, I don't mean that from a negotiation perspective. And I think Rangers are right to say we have a value for a player, and we expect to get as close to that value as possible. If you're through a few £100,000 apart, then I think you can come back to the table, and I think you can hash out a deal. Dessers, for me, I think has to go purely because of his age and what he's not going to be able, I don't think, to contribute as much as he could in the last 2 seasons. So now we're starting to lose goals as a result of that. So I think that we can spend our money elsewhere. Igaman is going to be an interesting one, because obviously that's a lot more money involved within that deal. From what we're led to believe, Lille and Rangers are some good way apart in terms of overall estimation. I think that it's quite clear, and I understand Igaman's desire to do this in terms of being able to go to one of the top 5 leagues in the world. It will be, hopefully, a stepping stone for him onto bigger things. And so you want to create that pathway for him. I think, is keen on that being able to happen. So my concern more than anything is that if we do stand fast and these deals don't transpire, how much enthusiasm do we have in terms of the players who are left? Now, Dessers, I don't think I would necessarily have a problem with. Igaman, I'm not going to criticise his attitude, because I think, like you say, he's went through a journey at Rangers, and he's come out on the other end, and I think he's absolutely shown his potential and where he can potentially go on to. My fear is that if he does want to be able to move and we can't make that move happen, how does he respond? And I think that's a legitimate concern, because we've seen it elsewhere. Again, my hope is that we can facilitate both deals. I am more and more convinced every day, with the way how Rangers are doing their business, that we do have targets lined up. and that we can execute deals very quickly, because we've shown already within the last week evidence of that. So I'm hoping that all parties can be satisfied, is probably my politician's answer to that, Davey. But you understand what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, rumours that they both want to leave, haven't seen the new travel range, I believe are unfounded.
I was gonna genuinely try and see if I could stay behind after the game, because when Rothwell and Lyle Cameron and all that came out, and Asgard came out wearing it, I just wanted to go down to the gates when they were leaving and apologise for it.
Yeah.
Could you imagine turning up in that, Jimmy?
Honest to God, I mean, it's so easy as well. There's so many great templates from history and Umbro kits, and they come up with that. But and the strip is a cracker. I'll balance it out and say that I really like the home top, and it looked great yesterday. So fair play on that one. Right then, folks, that will do us. This is just a kind of wee mini dipping our toe back in after the summer break, and we'll of course be back when the real stuff kicks off later this month. But in the interim, can I just point you in the direction of our live show at New Edmiston House? As I mentioned earlier, this is our 15th anniversary this summer, so we'll be celebrating that and looking ahead to the new season. It takes place on the 15th of August at New Edmiston House. General release tickets will be available this Friday, so check Heart and Hands social media feeds, check the Edmiston House website. You'll be able to get your tickets there. If you are a patron on our Patreon site, or if you're a member of New Edmiston House and on the mailing list, you will get pre-sale access. Please don't worry, and always sells it. So we are hoping it does again, and we're hoping that we get to see as many of you as possible. Cammy, you've done an interesting show for our Patreon. Tell the listeners all about it.
Yeah, we've got a long-time listener, an infrequent podder, I think it's fair to say, but that's absolutely understandable given how busy this man is. But we had I had the privilege of talking to Gordon Watson. He's well known from the Kiwi True Blues, but from his professional life, he is the general manager of Auckland City FC. They were at the Club World Cup across in the US the last couple of weeks. I think it's fair to say, Davey, some mixed results.
Mixed result, yeah. I mean,
results, up and downs.
But for a group of part-timers who didn't even have all their players because some of them couldn't get time off to go to it, to go there, they lost 10-0 to Bayern Munich at the start. But then by the end, they claimed a very famous draw.
Yeah, a famous draw against Boca Juniors. So Gordon and I had a chance to kind of catch up and really do a bit of a deep dive into, as you mentioned there, the real world challenges of these players being able to take time off of their work. These guys are school teachers and accountants and bricklayers, and all of a sudden they're playing against Bayern Munich and Benfica and Boca Juniors. Gordon goes into a lot of detail about the efforts that he and the rest of the staff do in terms of not just being able to raise funds and a lot of stuff, which was really great about protecting the players when they went onto that global stage, but also some of the more kind of day-to-day running in the club as well. He absolutely works his socks off. So it was a fantastic chat. I was really lucky to get the time with him, and I would urge everyone, if you're already on our Patreon site, go and listen to it. If you are not, sign up, then go and listen to it.
Yeah, you get all the Rangers stuff, obviously, and that's primarily what it is, but we do other things as well, and this is one of them, one of the special shows, and it really is excellent. Right then, folks, that will do us for this week. My thanks to our producers, Mike Lee and Paul Miles, and my thanks to Cammy for coming on this afternoon.
A pleasure as always, my friend. 15 years and a lot more to go.
Yeah, hopefully. Anyway, we'll be back soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.